if you would, can you give me your name for the camera?
Yes, my name is Jim Hall.
All right. And Mr. Hall, if you would, can you tell me a little bit about where you were born and where you grew up?
Yes, I grew up, unfortunately, up in the cold area up around Lake Erie, Pennsylvania, northwestern Pennsylvania, and went to school in that area and went to college in Penn State.
I guess, what was life like in that area growing up?
Well, one thing, it was we got an awful lot of snow. We'd have snow from Thanksgiving until spring, it seemed like, and if you didn't have a good if you didn't have a car that would go up and down the snow and ice, you didn't go anyplace. So that was my most remembrance of that part of the country.
When did you go to college at Penn State?
Well, when I graduated from high school, which was 1940 some, I forget, it's been so long now. But anyway, I wanted to be an engineer, and I went to Penn State, which was a great school for engineering. And I was there for the first semester, and I lived in a boarding house. We didn't have that many big places to stay, so you lived in boarding houses. And during one of the Sunday times when all of us, or the guys that lived in that boarding house, got together, we were sitting in a big parlor talking with each other about what was going on in the world, when all of a sudden over the radio, obviously back in those days there was no television, across the radio came a word that Pearl Harbor has been attacked. And everybody says, Pearl Harbor, what's that all about? And so we tried to get as much information as we could, and finally got all the latest information. And so I wanted to be part of the solving the situation. And so when I went back to home at Christmas vacation, I signed up for the Air Force, and that went over pretty good with the family, especially my dad, who was a World War I pilot. He didn't have much combat, but he was in the World War I as a pilot. And of course my mother wasn't all that happy about the whole thing, but it was something that I had to do, and so I did sign up. But unfortunately, as there were so many people signed up so quick, especially in the eastern United States where most of the people lived in those days, that it took almost over a year before they called me in to start my service. And during that time I had worked in a new plant that was being built in our neighborhood that was going to make bombs. So even before I got into the actual end of the war, I started getting things going that would be part of the war. So after I first was sent down to Florida for primary, to just get to be able to walk and hike and do all the kinds of things that a soldier is supposed to do. It was just that part of it. Had nothing to do with airplanes, but it had to do with the military part of it. But then finally, I worked my way through the system, and the system was quite interesting because there were so many people, and obviously there wasn't a place to put them all, and so they would park you in different areas until you could move on to another part and get going. And so it was quite a difficult way of getting something done. But little by little we went through the system and got down to the point where we were forgetting about being running up and down and marching, and we got to the point where all of a sudden we were going to become pilots. And I was assigned to down in Mississippi. Can I back up?
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah. Where did I say I went there? No, it was not Mississippi.
Were you talking about Lafayette?
Yeah,
Louisiana?
Louisiana. Yeah, Mississippi. Yeah. Okay.
That's next door.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead. I was first assigned to down to Lafayette, Louisiana, to go to primary flying school to learn the first time to learn to fly an airplane. And it was an interesting because I was a northern boy, and being down in the south was something quite different. And I'll tell you, it was so much different that I ran into one of the major things that happens down there. One day we were going to get a hurricane, we heard, and so all of us who had been soloed, who were able to fly the airplanes, we flew them as far north as we could and to another base up there. And then they sent us back down on a bus, and we spent the night in the digging holes to allow us to set the landing gear of our trainers down a little bit lower, and then we ended up putting anything we could find to go over the wings so that we could settle those down where we wouldn't hope that the wind wouldn't get underneath them and take them out. So wasn't too much later on, and all of a sudden this big wind came in, and we were in a fairly safe house, one of the few down there, they told us, and it was filled with all of the pilots and everybody all wondering what was going to happen. And after the things blew pretty bad all night long into early in the morning, and finally when that was over, we went out and we found that our airplanes had pretty well hung up all right, except about 3 of them that we had lost a couple wings on them and so forth. So after all of us went out on the field and got all the debris off the field in the next day and a half or so, and the water that was out there, because of the soil, it drained fairly fast. And so we were back in action another day, and we were back flying. And it was from there I went up into Arkansas to go to secondary training to fly a different kind of an airplane, which had bigger engines, which had more powerful engines, which had all different kinds of things that we didn't have in the primary school. And so that was in the second set to be making, it was or the chance they had to try to make a pilot out of you. And that was quite interesting. And then, after that, then you went to the final area, where it was down in Moultrie, Georgia. And down there, we had a big airplane with lots of power, and it was something quite different that we'd been had been expressed to. And we started to do a lot more things that were more set aside for being togetherness rather than flying individually, because we started doing formation flying. We fly all different kinds of long range trips we took, and night flying, which we hadn't done much of before. But this became a time when they tried to put us all together. Instead of being just a pilot, you were part of a team. Not that we were all going to go together any place. We were all going to be part of a team, and so you had to learn how to be effective in that team. So, but the main thing there, or not the main thing from a non-flying situation was the fact that that's where you got your wings, and that's where you got your rank. That's where you became a first lieutenant. And so that was a big day when you graduated from that situation. Now that meant that you were a pilot. It meant you were a pilot, but it didn't mean you could fly the airplane so yet. So it was quite a time, and you got a chance to go home, and go home, and you could go show everybody at home your wings and see your family, and then go back to school. And away we went back and started to do all kinds of different training, and that was all intended to make us a very effective group of people rather than one individual pilot doing his own thing. So it was then a question was one of the hard places for a lot of the people that we'd been working with, because this was a time when they were going to decide what kind of a pilot you were going to be in terms of the equipment that you would be using. And a lot of people wanted to be fighter pilots. Not too many people wanted to be bomber pilots, because words by this time about how the difficulties of bombers were doing, it wasn't something that most people wanted, and most people said they wanted to be a fighter pilot, and for that standpoint. But obviously your training results made up the decision by how your managers sent you off one place or to the other. So a lot of people got very unhappy because they wanted to be one and they didn't get what they wanted. But that's the way the ball bounced all the way around. In fact, over time, we had eliminated a lot of different people that weren't even, some people had not been able to become a pilot, and then they'd have to become a gunner or someone else if they wanted to stay in something having to do with aviation. So there was a lot of people that they thought they were going to be one thing that never were able to get that. So it was kind of difficult days in those times. But in my particular case, I got what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And so I was sent to a base up in Kentucky, Connecticut, where I was happy to find out they were going to put me on a P-47, and that was a real fighter plane that was a huge, big airplane, had a tremendous engine on it, and it had a lot of firepower with all of the machine guns, big heavy machine guns we had on both wings, and it could carry 500 pounds of bullets, 500 pounds of guns, 500 pounds of, better get that out of there.
Let's hang on just a second. Let's back up a little bit. You said you got what you wanted to become. You wanted to become a fighter pilot. Can you kind of go from there and tell me where you went next and being assigned your aircraft?
Oh yeah, that's what I thought I just said that.
I was going to get you to back up a little bit.
Oh sure, okay, sure. Yeah, you ready?
Yes, sir.
And you want me to tell you about?
Tell me about, you were saying that you got what you wanted. You wanted to be a fighter pilot, and then take me to getting into your first P-47 and being assigned that.
Okay, sure. Okay. I had heard so much information about this new airplane, which is the P-47 fighter pilot. I was quite interested in getting into the P-47. It sounded like a plane that had a lot of things that be very safe and could be very effective. So I went, when they came around to the point where where the people that were assigning people came to me and said, "What did you want to do? You're going to be a fighter pilot. Do you have a particular preference?" I says, "I sure do. I want to fly a P-47. And they said, "That's fine. You got it, Jim." He says, "Your record shows that you could handle that, we think." He says, "You'll have to prove it to us, but we think you can handle that." He says, "We're going to send you up into Connecticut, up to an air base up there, and that was where you will go into training to become a P-47 pilot. Now it'll take several different ways to get you there, but the first thing is we'll start at the first place, and that's up there in Connecticut, and that's when you'll get the basic start of the airplane. You'll get to know everything about it. You won't maybe do anything real much more. You won't do a lot of with other people. You'll learn mostly on your own, and we'll get to you to become a pilot so that you can be put in with other groups of people that we want to make this new airplane, which is relatively new, work." And so I went up there to Connecticut and started you'd do the same thing like you did in other schools. You'd have to get checked out in this little part of the airplane and that part, and you had to find out about that. I must have spent 3 days with my eyes closed, sitting in the cockpit with my hands going to, well, somebody said, where's the throttle? And I'd have to put my hand on it in the dark and so forth. And so you had to get the airplane so that it knew exactly, you knew every part of it from inside and out. And I had an unusual circumstance that happened to me, and I think about it still today, and I kind of somewhat laugh at myself. But I was flying one day, running what we called stop and goes. I was coming down and landed, and then I'd take right off and go around and come back and land again. And when I came in one time, I could not put the landing gear down. And I checked out all of the numbers and all the pieces and everything, anything I had control over, I checked and messed with and looked at. Still couldn't get my landing gear down. So I called the colonel. I says, Colonel, we got a little bit of a problem here. I can't get the gear down. He says, you got to be kidding. I says, no. I says, come on up and look. He says, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So he flew up in his airplane and come up to see, and we both went up high, much higher up in the air, and we tried a lot of different things. He looked down there and he says, well, the landing gear door is open. One of the landing gear doors are open. He says, he asked me to try to get it closed, and I couldn't get it closed. And he said, well, let's try this. And so we did all different kinds of things where I went upside down and tried to open up the gear, and I went down to 1,000 miles an hour down, straight down, and tried to open them up. Well, nothing worked. So he says, well, Jim, he says, you're going to have to sit around up here and drive around for a while. And I says, sit around is right, isn't it? He says, yeah, it is. And the reason for that is that because we were near the water, we had what we call a dinghy, a rubber dinghy, that if we ever got in the water, it would help us float. But that dinghy was made in such a way that we sat on it in the main seat. It was underneath the cushion that we had, but it had so many hard parts in it that would always make you always had a feeling you were sitting on something really bad, and so you got darn tired of sitting in that airplane on that dinghy. So when he said, Jim, you're going to have to bring this airplane in, I said, great. I says, I'll be glad to get out of this thing. And as a result, I was not particularly concerned about it. I said, if I can't get out of this airplane, if I have to bail out, but I said, we need the airplane badly because training was going on real fast, and we needed every airplane. So anyway, he says, all right. He says, you fly around up here for a while until I call you in. He says, I've got to get things ready on the ground so that when we come down, everything's all right. And I said, that's fine. So I went up and I flew all the way down around New York, and I flew up around Boston, and I'm flying around, back and around these places, just killing time. And I knew what he was doing. He was trying to burn fuel off my airplane. And the funny part about this whole thing is, when I think about it, is that he finally said, okay, Jim, he says, I want you to come down and land on runway 5. He says, now just to make sure, and that's where all our gear is set down there for rescue gear. He says, now to make sure that I'm sure that you know, he says, you come down and make a pass over runway 5. I says, okay, and I was quite up at altitude at that time, so I made a real round turn down around and came back around in the back of that runway, and I came practically on the runway. And back in those days, they didn't like you to have airplanes running close to the ground, and everybody liked to run them close to the ground. And I said, well, my heaven's sakes, I'm going to run right down this runway just like he said I would, and right just right off the, not obviously I wasn't landing on it, I was just running close to it. And as I was going, and I was going at a very fast speed, and I was going down the runway, and the colonel said, "Okay, Jim, you got it, pull up." I said, and I pretended like I didn't hear him, and I just kept going straight down there, and I was going as fast as I could go right down that runway. And he kept saying, "Jim, pull up, will you?" And I thought, well, I'm a hotshot fighter pilot. I can do this. You know, if I get a chance. But I finally got down the end of the runway, and I made a big turn and went up and went back around so that I could come back around to the runway again. And I took plenty of time going out to get all the speeds all set up where I wanted them. And then I turned and went towards the runway now, really to go down on the ground. And I had everything pretty well set up. And I think I was kind of felt that this was going to be quite of a test for me. I kind of had my own feeling that I could handle it. And I don't know why I was like that, but I think it was because all of the testing and all the stuff I had been through, all of the time I had been flying, and all of the things that I just felt that I could handle. Well, the net result was I did, because but it was funny, because funny in a sense that when I came nice and smooth down into the end of the runway and settled down, and when the airplane settled down, the first thing that I heard was a rumbling from behind me, and it was a scratching, and that was where it was a big area back there where there was a big round part underneath the airplane, and it was scraping. And then all of a sudden I heard the door that hadn't opened before, it was still not open, and it was scratching along the side. And then the most interesting one was, all of a sudden in front of my face I saw a big X. That was the propeller as it hit, and the propeller blades were scratching down, and it slowed down. And all of a sudden all of those things kept slowing down the airplane and slowing it down and slowing it down. And surprisingly, the airplane just skidded right straight ahead, and it didn't move. I thought maybe the landing gear door would make it go maybe jump off the runway, but it didn't. So by that time, as I had started down to land, I had opened up the canopy, so as soon as this airplane slowed down, I had the door open, I had the window open and door open on this, and I just jumped onto the wing on the left side, and then as it slowed down, real slowed down, I jumped off the wing, and then by that time all the other people were there, rescue kind of people, and we all got away from the airplane, and we looked to see if there was any reason that there might be anything on fire or anything like that, or blow up or something like that, but none of that did. So anyway, the airplane was down and was saved, and we didn't have to crash it or do anything with it. And as a matter of fact, we got most of the thing put back together, and if you can believe this, in about a day or so, they'd put a lot of new parts on the thing and fixed up what they did. And the reason for the thing was that when the landing gear goes up, it's such a big, long landing gear on that airplane. It needs to be, because of that big propeller that it has, that you have to kind of squeeze as it goes up into there. There's a tube that squeezes it so it tightens as it goes up, and a piece of that tube did not function properly, and so the airplane, when you tried to put the gear down, it wouldn't go down past that piece so it just stuck there. So any event, they fixed that real fast, and they got the airplane, And the colonel, it was surprising. It was a little when I'd got off the wing when I landed there. He kind of, there was a bunch of guys around there, and he kind of he walked up to me and looked me in the eye and gave me a funny little look, and he says, "You had a little trouble